Coogs House. Yes, Houston falls to 3-2 after losing 85-80 in overtime to Alabama. Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, daily podcast about the Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan, hater came to set by, or just someone who watched a good basketball game and can't believe what just happened, thank you for making Locked On Cougs. At this point, it might be live your last, or the next morning your first listen of the day. If you want to join the conversation but don't know what to say in the comments, tell us down below. You know, when I thought this game was going to go the other way, I'm going to had some different funny quip about like Alabama barbecue and the white sauce and whatever. Tell me what you got in the comments about all of that. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, and we do have fun on that later. But as we said, Houston falls in the Players Era Festival 85-80 in this basketball game. A ugly contest, to say the very least. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about backup point guard issues that plagued this team. And then, bluntly, Houston's got ready to play again. I mean, about 24 hours from now, 25 hours from now, Houston tips off with Notre Dame in a late one tomorrow night. And so we, frankly, just have a lot of things to kind of get past and move forward on in this basketball game. Now, reaction to this game as I was watching, I immediately started at the first few minutes from my phone. I wasn't quite back home yet to put on the TV. But it felt like, first of all, it felt like a March Madness game. Both teams selling out all over the floor, dive on the ball. I think at one point it counted 6 players on the floor for a loose basketball. And ultimately that kind of slugfest, rock fight kind of thing led to a bunch of fouls being called. Houston got called for 30. Alabama got called for 25. I would argue that there was some timeliness in some of those as well. It went from 4 or 5 minute stretch with no fouls to 4 or 5 minute stretch where it felt like there was a foul every 4 seconds of basketball. And that really kind of, unfortunately, I think did play an impact in the game. I think it's one that I don't think it was one that Houston couldn't have overcome. I don't mean to say that's the reason Houston lost. And I was certainly in my own, like, what the blankety blank, blank, blank kind of emotions about the way some of this went, right? Including a possession near the end where Houston, or Houston got knocked down 3 different times in the course of trying to make a tying field goal, and nothing happened. We'll talk about the point guard and the backup point guard and the situation there in a moment. That's my second segment I got in my queue here. I really want to look at some of the other aspects of this game, though, more holistically, because I think that gets its own segment and section. And on the whole, even with Milos Uzan playing just 12 minutes because of his foul trouble, having just 5 points, having just 1 assist, Houston got this game to overtime and lost by just 5 against a top 10 team and a truly neutral floor, right? And so I think that there's other things to look at here too. Like L.J. Cryer had 30, which is incredible. He's the first Houston Cougar in a bajillion years to have 30 against a top 10 team or something crazy. I saw the stat fly across, and I only half saw it because I was upset about something else in the game. He did that playing 42 minutes, which I didn't know he was going to be able to do. But he also, after playing 42 minutes, was still 9 of 26 from the field. Looked like his legs got dead by the end of regulation. He had a great look at the end of regulation that I've seen him make in this game, I believe, and missed it. He then got to overtime, went ice cold in overtime. Meanwhile, on the other side, Mark Sears did play 41 minutes for Alabama and had his own 24, 3 and 4 kind of night. He had a very good night with the basketball. And ultimately, it was interesting because in the lead up to this game, I mentioned that Alabama to date shoots a lot of threes and had not been making them at a high clip. In this game, they shot 33s and made nearly 37% of them on 11 from 30 behind the arc. And Houston, conversely, who had been shooting the ball as well as anyone in America to this point, legitimately in terms of percentage, was shooting the best in America as a team of teams with over a certain amount of makes. Forget what it was. And they were 6 of just 19. So low volume and low percentage. Just not the way I saw that game playing out. And I guess part of that, do need to give credit to Nate Oates and the game plan there. But ultimately, I see that as a failure of the offense of finding shots that work for Houston and, some bad luck on watching Alabama make shots they hadn't been making to this point. I know it didn't count, but like Mark Sears banked in a 3 at one point after the shot clock had gone off. That ultimately kind of felt indicative of the way Alabama was shooting the basketball. I got other games going on right here on my screen. I got Notre Dame on as well because that's Houston plays tomorrow. So if I glance over, that's what I'm checking out, seeing what's going on over there. The other thing I think is interesting in this one is Houston got worked on the glass, which is nothing you typically see out of a Houston Cougar basketball team. And frankly, when you see it, it's almost always a Houston Cougar lost. So much of what Houston does is predicated on finding ways to get extra possessions, both in steals and rebounds, offense rebounds, etc. And you'll often see what I think other offenses call crappy shots thrown off the backboard because they know they've got a rebounding advantage inside. Houston gets out rebounded in this game 48-39. And ultimately, I don't think it's really because of a real true size advantage. Omar Yuri, for their true big man, played just 17 minutes. Daibute played 28 minutes. He was the far more impactful big guy for Alabama. Grant Nelson, he was fine. He played 40 minutes, had 10 rebounds, and a per minute basis for a 6'10" guy. I don't know if that's necessarily all that great, but he did have a double-double in this game. Ultimately, though, I think the deal is that Houston got beat at several things they do. Alabama had their own 5 steals. Houston had 10. I guess that's typically something we see Houston win, but Houston still managed to have 12 turnovers in this game, which is so. I mean, Alabama had 15, but that's way too close for what Houston's trying to do typically, especially when you're going to also lose that rebounding battle. 20 of those 48 rebounds for Alabama also were offensive. Like, I know they're not practicing tomorrow. They'll have a shoot around in a game because they play Notre Dame late in the day, but 20 offensive rebounds for Alabama was the kind of thing that Kelvin will too, but Kellen, as the guy and the assistant coach that works with the big guys specifically, will honestly lose a lot of sleep over. You lose a game in overtime by 5 points with 2 starters fouled out, and you give up 20 offensive rebounds. I mean, that is shades of what Miami did a couple years ago when they beat Houston in the Sweet 16. It's when Houston loses games to good teams, they kind of look like that, right? Either someone got crazy hot, Alabama shot better than they typically do as a team, not a single person necessarily. Those Sears did have 24, and they find ways to get extra possessions. The 20 offensive rebounds certainly allude to that. Just such an ugly contest, and I haven't even gotten to the offense because I'm trying to save the backup point guard stuff for a second. I got a couple comments here. If you got more to throw them in the chat, we'll get to them. I have RSVP 14, who has apparently given up on the season already. RSVP 13 says 3-2, not good. Don't even say it's early in the year. It's early for Auburn and Alabama to face it. The Cougars can't beat Alabama. How many points in overtime? Sad. I'm not great at math. I think they scored 7 points in overtime. For what it's worth, Houston scored just 2. That's more about offense than defense to me, and that's more about Houston than Alabama to me. Again, they played 2 top 10 teams in November, and apparently this guy's throwing in the towel. Auburn showed up, says, come on, guys, really wanted y'all to win. That seems akin to like when teams play, UT Austin, or teams play A&M, or teams play SMU, Memphis, whomever. Houston fans get in the chat and say we want them to win as well. I've enjoyed my interactions with Auburn fans for what it's worth. So I guess thanks for being here. Lead guard play will be an issue. I think that is fair. And I'll get to that in a second, the second segment. I want to get to Alan Snyder's other comments. He said, why didn't Terrence play down the stretch? And I am worried about that. Terrence has had a propensity to get tight with that Achilles tendon when he comes off the floor. He came off the floor in the late second half and did not go back in. It didn't look like anything was bothering him while he was playing, but that's the kind of time where you could see someone get tight, and it's hard to get loosened back up before getting back in there in the game. in such a short notice, right? And so, he is legitimately not quite 12 months post surgery on the Achilles tendon. I think people forget how long that typically takes to heal. That he's even giving us the 20 minutes he is strong recovery. His injury was a full Achilles tear. It did have a full surgery. It did have all of that, right? He's just still recovering, and I think based on what Sampson has said about other times Terrence Arsenault has come out of the game and not gone back in, I'm guessing that it was that he came out, got tight, and couldn't get it loosened back up before getting back out there, because obviously he is a difference maker for this team when he's on the floor. And as long as he's getting better and better each day and good to go by January, February, that'd be a whole lot different. It does not solve this lead guard issue that Alan brings up, though. And so I want to talk about that in a segment, in the next segment in a second. But before we get to that, I do want to remind you today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, where you can get ready to tackle the NFL action. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 back in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. When you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more. The same place that you place your bets. If it's FanDuel.com to join today, get started with $150 back in bonus bets if your first $5 bet hits. That's FanDuel.com. Now puts a hunt to make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Parker Ainsworth locked on Coogs here. We're live reacting to Alabama and Houston. Alabama beats Houston 85-80 in overtime in a Las Vegas NIL Players Era Festival. It was an ugly game. I wonder, the the 85 points, I think, throws people off as to what all happened offensively in this game. But the biggest story of the game, as Alan brings up here, is the lead guard play. So Milos Uzan, starting point guard for the Houston Cougars, plays just 12 minutes, scores 5 points, has an assist, has a rebound, but he fouls out. He was in foul trouble the whole first half, came in, got in foul trouble the whole second half, did not obviously make it to overtime. And for what it's worth, Manuel Sharp also fouled out, played 30 minutes. He managed to get more minutes in before getting asked to sit down. And I have to say that this is reminiscent of about this time a year ago. I can't even remember necessarily what the game was, but Houston has had trouble since, honestly, I'd say Marcus left, but maybe it was Tremont, maybe it was before that. But backup point guard has been an issue. Now, I want to stress this by saying, backup point guards don't just grow on bushes and stuff like that. You can't just find a backup point guard. It's the most challenging position to play on the basketball court in terms of the basketball IQ kind of stuff, right? You have to have a great feel. It's hard to just come off the bench and play that position, etc. But it's consistently been a problem for Houston. And frankly, I thought Sampson did a good job in talking about, everyone always wanted to ask about replacing Jamal Shedd, what you do at point guard. And Sampson, to his credit, was very quickly hey, we're replacing the point guard position. Jamal Shedd is impossible to replace, but we can find a point guard, right? And Milos, to his credit, when he has played, and even the 12 minutes he had in this game, he had a positive plus minus again in a loss for Houston, right? Milos is a good point guard, a very good Big 12 point guard. I'd argue he might have a shot at the next level. He's 6'4", sees the floor really well, etc. He can't just play 12 minutes. Period. This team cannot afford to have Milos Uzan play just 12 minutes. He's too valuable to what they do. And if I'm being blunt, they ain't got a backup option that's worth it, right? Now, part of that, I think, is that LJ Cryer is too much of a true shooting guard. He's required too much in the offensive scoring load to be playing the point guard role, right? That's a hard position to get both in. And frankly, we saw the games for last year where Jamal Shedd, who is a pro point guard, when Jamal got 30, his assist numbers dipped, right? That's just hard to do both things. When I look at the rest of the team, I mean, Mercy is a shooting guard. Malik is the guy that asked to do it, but he's really just a good athlete that is kind of filling the role. He's probably really more of a wing in his heart of hearts as well. Emmanuel Sharp is a true shooter that, again, he he turned the ball over once dribbling tonight, but it's not necessarily like a guy and that's just one time considering how much the ball was in his hands, but it's not necessarily somebody that you want playing the point guard position for long stretches. Bluntly, their best like creator in a more like, where do you center your offense through is Jawan Roberts. He was dealing with a host of different things and bumps and bruises in this one. At one point, his eye got poked so bad it was swelling up. You could see they zoomed in on one time on the bench, and like it was clearly like swollen shut at that point in time. All of that is to say that this team does not have that. Now, can Mercy develop into that at some point in his college career? If Mercy can develop into a point guard or a combo guard and not just a shooting guard, that kid's a pro, right? Like that's the difference there, right? If LJ can take on that responsibility and get better at that between now and the end of March, that guy also will have a shot at the pros. There aren't a whole lot of 6'2" shooting guards in the NBA. Frankly, Marcus Sasser is kind of one of the few, right, at 6'3". But LJ Cryer can become a pro if he can truly transform into a combo guard. Unfortunately, at this point in the season, he's not there yet. There's not a backup point guard on this roster. They piecemeal it. They got a great athlete in Malik, and Malik can defend 1 through 4, really. And so he can defend other teams' point guards. He can distribute the ball, and he does a lot of things well. He's just not naturally at that spot necessarily. Certainly not at the level that Houston's going to have to play to be a top 10 team, right? And that's, I think, what we're seeing here in the losses is Houston having trouble in both games with a backup point guard because Milos is in foul trouble. I mean, Houston was up 5 when he fouled out in the Auburn game, right? He had a positive plus-minus in this game. And played just 12 minutes, right? That role continues to be a problem. Now, spoiler alert, they got a really good one coming in next year, class 2025, Kingston Fleming. So I talk about that ad nauseum on this podcast. But in the present tense, for the present day Cougars, that doesn't matter. We talked a lot of the class 2025 being a historic class for this program. We're going to talk about them a lot before they show up and a lot while they're here and while they're winning championships and so on in this Cougar red uniform. But in the present tense, you need a backup point guard. And Rusty, first of all, welcome back to the show. It's been a minute since I've seen your comments, and I love having Rusty on it because it's always insightful. Rusty brings up that ref made a mockery of this game, redux the Auburn game, and sitting our key players for long stretches, including down the wire. I would also say that part of the value in a point guard that you see Milos do when he's able to is you get a guy that can settle things down out there, right, when there's been a couple of bad plays in a row. One of the things that I think Jamal Shed had a great feel for a year ago as a point guard, not as a pro, but as a point guard, right, this part is replaceable, is when Houston had 3 or 4 bad possessions in a row offensively, needed a bucket to keep pace, a bucket to cut the bleeding or whatever, right? He'd go into HB dive, he'd head to the basket, he'd have a drop off or a kick out for 3, and he knew where his guys were. He'd find a good shot. And more often than not, they made it, right? He just had a knack for finding that kind of a spot. Point guards do that to curb whatever the momentum is, right? And so, that's the way that thing goes. Now, do I think that there were also missed fouls called? I got people talking about it in the comments. I can see you, Walter. I see it. Like, yes, I also think there are missed fouls. We can talk about that between now and Timbuktu. But at the end of the day, having a backup point guard, I think, also wins you this game in regulation. Doesn't even get you to overtime where that gap got exacerbated some. I don't know that it gets fixed, though. It's a hard thing to teach. Quanis works with the guards at practice. Quanis understands playing the point guard role very well at a very elite level, right? Overall, right, I think that the true thing is for this team is it's more likely that they find ways to keep Milos on the floor and keep him out of foul trouble than finding a true backup point guard, because he's good enough. He is. He just hasn't gotten to play in these 2 losses because of foul trouble, right? Fouled out when they're up 5 in the Auburn game. I look at this as like you're going to watch his matchups, make sure he's covering guys that maybe don't put the ball on the floor as much or drive as much, right? You do a bunch of things like that. Now, you could also, in ways to like maybe spell him minutes, work through Arsenault as a creator in the half court, Roberts as a creator in the half court, and kind of get the ball out of the point guard's hands. You've seen pro teams do this. I mean, Jokic is a center and he does it. LeBron is a forward and he does it. Doncic is not a point guard. He does all these other pro creators, right? Will run a point guard type of set for a non-point guard in the half court. It's really actions and whatever because the pro basketball, but I digress. You could do that for other guys and maybe get some of the production you're looking for. But ultimately, I think what's going to have to happen is they're going to spend more time, or they should spend more time working on getting Uzan in the game more in these tough games where he can't foul out, right? Finding his matchups in this game. I would have thought he could have covered Phylon and been okay. Phylon did not make a basket in this game. And so maybe that's the matchup he should have had more in this game from a true matchup perspective. Keep out of foul trouble and so on, right? Obviously Phylon played down here. It says 15 minutes on stats. So maybe that means he also gets some minutes on Stevenson or Sherrill or whomever, right? But keeping him off of Sears and Right Cell because those guys attack the rim and put a lot of pressure on the rim because you just can't have Uzan foul. Like, frankly, if LJ Cryer's in foul trouble, he had 30 tonight, but his backup is Mercy Miller, and Mercy Miller can play the backup two-guard role a lot better than anyone on this team can play the backup point guard role, right? I think those things will happen. I trust the coaching staff to get those kind of things figured out. And frankly, Milos has shown us things, whether go back and watch the Oklahoma stuff or when he's been able to get on the floor this year, that he's very adaptable and very quick to learn. He adapted the Houston culture very quickly. This is just going to take time. The issue is that this all feels like a one-year experiment. So many of this team, I mean, Francis, Roberts, Cryer, Ramon, Malik, so many on this team are seniors, and this is it, right? And so the idea of like it takes time is very true, but how much time you got, right? Because we're really talking about like for those guys, I mean, Roberts this is it. We got 2025 class coming in next year. I already talked to people about 2026s. This Christian Gibson kid out of the city of Houston is the real deal if he'll commit one day, right? That's all the future. That's all fun. In the present tense, they've got to figure this out. And I think that's the best fix, easiest fix. And again, all of it is easier said than done. I want to react a little bit more to this one. And I want to talk some about getting into the Notre Dame game tomorrow in a second, as Notre Dame is currently playing Rutgers on my other screen. So let's get into that 1 second. Parker Ainsworth, Locked On Coogs here, reacting to Alabama and Houston tonight in the Las Vegas NIL Players Era Invitational Festival deal. It's been a bunch of different names at this point. Houston falls 85-80, and that's why I'm feeling fairly monotone at this moment. And so Houston ends up dropping their first game, second game of the season. Houston falls 3-2, both losses to top 10 teams. Top 10 teams by combined 10 points. Not great, but not a death knell either. The biggest issue then we talked about in the second segment was losing the point guard for so much of this game. Milos Uzan plays just 12 minutes. Hard to find offense without him on the floor. What can they do to keep him on the floor? I want to stress as I see comments flying in, like I don't mean that to say that there were not moments that I felt like Houston was getting screwed by the referees in this game. Alabama shot 41 free throws, and Houston never intentionally fouled them, right? That's a noticeable difference. They made 30 of 41. Houston went 26 of 33. Houston actually shot 5 percentage points better from the free throw line, but Alabama got 4 more points from the free throw line in a 5-point game. I think that's a pretty darn big deal. I think the more tangible fixes, though, are getting the point guard out of foul trouble. I think the deal here is also being out rebounded 48-39. Francis wasn't moving quite like he typically does, so you had a lot of Tugler and Roberts, but then Roberts had his eye poked out at one point. So you had some TA at the power forward trying to play small with it, but then he went out and didn't come back in. And I don't know. There's a lot of things going on. These guys are a little banged up already. I'd rather be banged up in November than in February and March, but that's the way it goes. I see comments flying in about him still being injured. I don't know that he's ever going to be. I don't know when he will be fully healthy. I don't think it'll be for a minute. He missed like 19 days of practice in the month of October with whatever his injury was, groin related, I think, groin hammy related. But with big guys, those things always get tricky. I don't mean to not bring up each one of those, but there are a lot of people talking about Francis's minutes in the comments. He did play just 12 minutes without necessarily having fouled out of this one. He did have 4 fouls, and that hampered it some. And I do also think it's worth a lot like Arsenault. Once you've got some of that, you've got, you got to sit still, and that tightens up. All of a sudden, it's hard to get back in the game. Houston's got, from the time of this recording, near almost exactly 25 hours till the next tip-off with Notre Dame. Notre Dame is a good basketball team, not necessarily as good as Alabama. I think Alabama, if you're going to say that they beat Houston, so they're better than Houston, I think they play that series out for a 7-game series. It might go Houston's way, but I digress. Alabama won, so you call Alabama the best team in the tournament. I think Notre Dame is far from second. Not to say they're not good, but Rutgers is probably better. We'll see how this one results, and then I'll be wrong. I think Houston's better. And then on the other side of the bracket, you got A&M and stuff like that too. Right now, I'd say if I look at Notre Dame, the big issue to me is the point guard. I watched a little bit of them before, and I got this game on live, and I'll be on it more as we get ready for tomorrow once this wraps up. But Marcus Burton, he's a not so big point guard, but he's your what is it? Sampson says head of the snake kind of guy. He is aggressive. He gets them rolling. He finds guys in the right spots. He assists on 29% of their baskets. That's nearly a third of their baskets are assisted by him. You also have that he's like a pretty solid scorer, a decent 3-point shooter on low attempts. So we'll see how that carries out, etc. I look at Notre Dame. If I'm trying to think of what they're going to give Houston issues with, I probably would also go with some size kind of stuff. Tay Davis and Kevin Iji. Those two guys are both about 6'10", both about 210 pounds. Tay Davis is 210 pounds. Kevin Iji is more like 250. Big guys, long guys, and they're not necessarily the best scorers or shooters, but they make their own offense in a big way by getting putbacks and rebounds and so on. And I wouldn't have thought that'd be a big issue for Houston, except that they just got beat so badly on the boards against Alabama, and frankly, the raw numbers for these two bigs feel a lot like Alabama's bigs coming into this game. As I look at the rest of their lineup, on the whole, I don't know if there's anyone that scares me too terribly much. You got to get out. They have a kid named Burke Chibahar. He's a good 3-point shooter. He does like one thing, one trick pony, right? Braden Shrewsbury shoots a lot of threes, makes a decent amount of them. He's the starting shooting guard, I believe. Braden Shrewsbury, that is. He's a 6'3" guy. I think Emmanuel's fine there. The biggest thing to me will be Houston correcting their own mistakes, though. I don't see this as a team that, if Houston plays their best basketball, will I don't think if Houston plays their best basketball, I think Notre Dame's got a shot. I do think, though, that Houston's got to bring their A game. Notre Dame's not that kind of a slouch. And bring your A game tomorrow after playing this one. It's going to be tough. Your bodies are worn out. Now, one positive to these guys playing maybe less minutes than you would have wanted. Like Francis just 12, Milos just 12. Arsenault 21 before we didn't see him again. Maybe that means their legs aren't quite as gassed out for tomorrow. Who knows if we see Arsenault tomorrow? The Achilles thing always scares me. I don't know if I'd play him on back-to-back days like that if I didn't have to, but we're going to get to that tomorrow throughout the day. Today was a busy day at Locked On Coogs. Talked some about recruiting, big 5-star commitment, Chris Sinak. Football, fired the offensive coordinator. I got told about 8 hours before it happened. So I was fast and furious trying to figure out what they were going to do on that. I think they got some cool options there, though. Football is also playing BYU this weekend. We got one of those games to preview at some point this week. It's Thanksgiving Thursday, Big 12 squad, book club. Holy, we got a lot of stuff going on. Locked On Coogs, primary Locked On Podcast Network. We appreciate you coming in tonight. Appreciate you starting your day with us each and every day. Again, Locked On Coogs, primary Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team every day. We'll be back live tomorrow night after Houston and Notre Dame. That game tips off at 11:30 in local 11:30 Texas time, 9:30 in Las Vegas. Again, it's the exact same time slot Notre Dame is playing in right now. So be prepared to stay up late, have that extra 5-hour energy shot or whatever, and let's stay up and talk to more Houston Cougars tomorrow. Locked On Cougs again. Love you guys. Thank you. And even on the hard days, go Cougs.